In this stands a guy named Adu. He watches the rank exam and explains the four foundational faculties to us. They are physical strength, body control, magic reserves, and magic control. Adu has the ability to visualize the scores of other people's four foundational faculties, and he demonstrates it on one of the participants. He checks Raster and is amazed by his A rank scores. His eyes feel a bit strained because it's dangerous for him to look at anyone too strong. Adu decides to check Rick's stats, but they are so great that his eyes feel like they are about to explode, and he screams in pain. Nearby, Alyssa and Rhea introduce themselves to each other. The other members of Rynette's party call her over, so she invites Alyssa to join them. Alyssa is shocked to see an orc sitting there, and Rynette declines Meat's offer to sit next to him because she knows that he has bad intentions. Mizet offers the seat to Alyssa after he takes an interest in her, but Rynette gets Alyssa out of safety. Rick finally enters the arena, and Bron asks Rynette how their old rookie will do. Rynette reveals that he will pass the exam, but Alyssa points out that it won't be so easy because he's going against Raster. Raster is an A rank, and he always goes overboard to embarrass all the rookies. Alyssa is shocked, though, when the members of Rick's party say it won't be a concern. Raster's siblings cheer him on, and Raster is impressed that Rick was able to get away from his guards. Raster declares that he's nothing like his weak guards, but Rick can tell that just by looking at him. Rick wonders why Raster became an adventurer in the first place, so Raster explains that he's a noble and just did it to raise his status even further. He has actually grown bored of being an adventurer and is just waiting for the perfect time to quit. Rick can tell that this guy is not a real adventurer, so he refuses to lose to someone like him. Raster starts the fight off with a level 1 attack, but he wonders if Rick is terrified after not moving at all. Rick isn't scared, though, as he's just reminding himself not to let his anger control him. Rynette told him to use the first minute of his fight to calm himself and observe his opponent. Rick does that, but Raster is impatient, and Rick is stunned to see him use level 3 magic without an incantation. The insanely powerful attack hits Rick, but he remains standing strong as he's analyzing his opponent, just like Rynette said. Alyssa is worried about him, but Bron says that an attack like that is nothing for Rick. He explains that out of the four foundational faculties, magic reserve has to be developed before a person reaches the age of 20. Otherwise, there is no hope for further growth. Rick became an adventurer at 30, so his magic reserves are extremely low. However, Bron had a solution, and we go into the past once again. Bron told Rick that the one thing he could always depend on was his body, and he decided that they would take a little stroll to the next town over. The problem was that he strapped Rick to some giant weights that weighed 100 kg each. Rick was horrified, but Bron just told him to hurry up because there was a den of carnivorous monsters in the forest. To make up for his lack of magic reserves, Rick trained exhaustively in the other three areas. Raster attacks Rick with level 4 magic this time, but Rick once again is unfazed. Bron then reveals that for physical strength, he built Rick up from scratch. Even though Mizet hates doing bothersome things, he was the one that taught Rick magic control. Mizet took this responsibility because he didn't want Rick turning into a pile of ash after an attack one day. Rick was trained in body control by Rynette, and Alyssa is shocked to learn that Rynette is not just some normal maid. Rick amazingly latched onto all the training they threw at him, and he now stands within the realm of F's rank, just like the rest of them. Raster unleashes another attack, and Rynette explains that Rick has no awareness of how powerful he is. This is because no matter what kind of insane training they put Rick through, they always told him that an F rank should be able to do it easily. Just like the time Bron told him that an F rank can smash through a giant boulder with one strike. Raster does some trash talking as he unleashes a barrage of attacks, and Alyssa is horrified when one attack seems to crush Rick. Raster mockingly says that he went a bit overboard, but he is stunned when Rick emerges unscathed. Raster is annoyed by his resilience, and his siblings are shocked by the old man's strength. Raster powers himself up to finish the battle with his fist, but Rick just easily knocks him back. Rick now finally understands what Rynette was telling him. Raster is so obsessed with the talents he was born with, he neglected to refine and further them. Raster has vast reserves of magic, but he is sloppy with everything he does. Against an opponent like Raster, Rick is sure that he can't lose. Raster says that Rick just got lucky, and his siblings are amazed when he finally decides to use his full incantation magic. His long incantation results in a crazy big fireball attack, but everyone is shocked when Rick easily stops it with just one hand. Rick declares that the attack was too sloppy, Amit explains that Rick worked his magic with a high degree of accuracy to block the attack. Rick was so precise that he didn't have to use 1/100,000th of the energy that Raster did to create the attack. This means that someone like Rick, with barely any magic reserves, can do stuff like that as long as they have precise magic control. Raster continues to say that Rick is just getting lucky and goes in for another attack. Rick is too quick for him, though, so Raster must change his body to steal to avoid getting obliterated. Raster finally admits that Rick possesses abilities above A rank but still says that luck is choosing Rick's side. Rick can't believe that this guy still refuses to acknowledge him, so he points out that he wasn't even using magic, he was just using body control. Raster just wants to know how Rick got so strong in just 2 years, but Rick is insulted by the question as he thinks about his torturous training. He had to run through explosions, swim through monster capture fluid until he choked on it, and he wasn't allowed out of a dragon's den until he defeated it. Alyssa is horrified to hear just some of the training he went through because normally someone wouldn't survive it. She is then shocked when Bron reveals that Rick didn't survive it, he lost his life multiple times. But Bron's heal can bring someone back to life as long as it's applied immediately after passing away. This kind of horrifying training was necessary, though, because repeatedly breaking down and rebuilding someone's body is how they get stronger. Mizette was also impressed by how Rick stayed in there no matter how crazy the training got. He looks back to his training with Rick and how he would kick Rick off a mountain so he could develop a sense of being able to see the wind. This, of course, led Rick to losing his life repeatedly, and Bron would have to revive him. Mizette was just as guilty of this type of training, as we see that she would crush Rick under boulders. Reinette's training involved learning to cut falling trees by using their momentum, and this caused Rick to lose his life as well. Raster just assumes that Rick is lying because he refuses to believe that such terrible training even exists. And even if it did exist, he can't see anyone being motivated enough to go through it. Rick's response is simple: his dream is his motivation. His dream is to defeat the world's strongest monster, Kaiser Elpiot. Raster and Fred have a good laugh as they call Rick an idiot, and they can't believe that he is being serious. Alyssa knows that Kaiser Elpiot is the ultimate monster that appears in the legends of the hero Yamato. Bron reveals that Rick's goal is also the ultimate goal of their group, the Orichalcum-Fist. Raster points out that the legends of the hero Yamato are just bedtime stories for kids, and defeating Elpiot is the dream of a small child. Rick doesn't care what Raster thinks, as his dream has nothing to do with him anyway. Raster agrees and decides to put an end to their battle. He surprisingly uses level 7 magic to restrain Rick, but he tells Rick not to get too amazed just yet. Raster plans to show Rick what true talent looks like, and he wants to make it so Rick can never speak nonsense again. He finishes a long incantation and declares that he will show everyone the greatest magic a human can wield. Level 8 nature composed magic. This is the greatest magic that Raster, the man of 1,000 spells, has in his arsenal. This is his ultimate move, and it results in Raster controlling a giant tree golem from the inside. Raster commands Rick to grovel before him, and he mocks Rick for planning to use some airshot attack. Rick declares that he will punch right through him, but Raster says he's being delusional. Rick asks Raster how many times he has practiced using the golem before. Raster has no clue because he mastered it after only using it a couple of times. Rick then shockingly reveals that he has used his airshot attack 100 million times. Raster's siblings think he's lying, and Alyssa wonders if 100 million times in 2 years is even physically possible. Of course, Bron reveals that it's possible, but only if space-time magic is used. Raster has heard enough, so he announces that it's time to crush Rick's dreams just like he did to Link's. Raster launches his most powerful level 8 attack, but Rick breaks free from the restraints and shockingly stops the attack with his level 1 airshot attack. Raster mocks him as he's sure that he will crush Rick, but he is stunned when his golem begins to break apart. Rick's airshot then destroys Raster's golem. Raster refuses to believe that this could happen to a noble like him, but his golem is destroyed, and he is sent flying into the stands. Rick now taunts the so-called noble elite, and he points out that his dream is still completely unharmed. Everyone is amazed to see Rick victorious because he just looks like a normal old guy. Rick's group congratulates him on his victory, and Rick finally realizes that he really has gotten a lot stronger. He can't believe that he didn't realize how strong he actually is until now, and he thanks everyone for helping him. Just then, they hear Raster's siblings telling him to get medical treatment, but he's determined to speak with Rick. Rick can already tell that Raster is wondering how an elite like him could lose to a late starter like Rick. Fred must be held back from defending his brother, but Rick just has an answer for Raster. Rick simply explains that he limits the number of techniques he uses and trains himself exhaustively in them. Rick gives Raster some advice on how he can do the same, but the noble is still angry. Raster promises to be Rick's examiner again for his next promotion and declares that he will win next time. Raster's siblings leave with him, but Angelica surprisingly shows Rick some respect. The next day, the participants that passed the E-rank exam are announced over a loudspeaker. Their numbers are announced in order, so Rick patiently waits while his friends wait nearby. Ronette urges to see him so calm, so Rick explains that he was just remembering something.